Okay, so it literally took me 9 hours to get through and understand the entire Justin Baldoni lawsuit. I would be lying to you guys if I didn't say reading this and going through it with a fine-tooth comb and really making a meaningful effort to just look at the facts alone didn't completely change my entire perspective on the situation. So I'm gonna do my best to go through the most important points that I found because I think I discovered some things that I have not seen anybody else talk about. Before I do, I would just like to say that I don't get paid through TikTok, and doing these types of videos, the video essays, the deep dives, it doesn't really benefit me or my business in any way. So it would really just mean a lot if you're not following me to just press the little follow button. It's free, it's really easy, and it would mean a lot, so thank you. Now, before people come at me in the comments, I just want to say, yes, initially I did fully believe Blake Lively, and even after Justin Baldoni filed his first lawsuit against the New York Times, I read that, I still was not fully convinced of his case, to be honest with you. And I'm not going to apologize for that, because at the end of the day, we should all be aware it is statistically unlikely for a woman to lie about sexual harassment claims. So I'm not going to apologize for having a knee-jerk reaction of trying to kind of course correct. However, there's also a special place in hell for people who lie about these types of things because it creates an atmosphere where people who are real victims are scared to come forward. I was not in the room. I do not know these people. You guys know how I feel about celebrities. But just keep in mind the track record here. I was one of the few people that I didn't immediately change my mind when Justin Baldoni first came out with his side of the story. I was not prepared for the mountain and the line-by-line evidence that disputed every single solitary thing that Blake Lively said. Everything. So, unless Blake Lively has some massive smoking gun, like a video of Justin Baldoni harassing her or doing something terrible, I am terrified for her and Ryan Reynolds' reputation because if this goes to court, it could be the end of them. The end of them forever because they seem like terrible, terrible people. So after reading the first two lawsuits and going through them line by line, there was still one question for me that wasn't adding up, which is how did this seemingly normal friendship and working relationship between Justin and Blake turn sour so dramatically and escalate to the point of such intense hatred between the two? And after reading this lawsuit, I think we found that answer. I truly, wholeheartedly believe that the only explanation to this is that there was some type of underlying flirtation happening between the two. I believe that someone developed feelings for the other. Ryan Reynolds sensed this, discovered this in some way, because this is the only explanation for me as to why he would be so bent on absolutely destroying this individual's life. I'd like to remind you guys that both Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds met each other being co-stars and fell in love being co-stars. This is something that happens very often because you're in close quarters with someone, all the actors are good looking, you're simulating sex and kissing with somebody, feelings can occur. This is also how Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds met when they were both with other partners. I believe that both Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds cheated on their respective partners when they got together on Green Lantern, allegedly. So when we look at their messages, I think it makes a lot of sense because I don't know about you guys, but I don't think this is appropriate the way that these co-stars were speaking to each other. So let's look at this. On both their parts. At one point, Justin Baldoni messages Blake Lively in the evening and says, "I like sentimental Blake." She says, "Never met her." He says, "I also like asshole Blake, don't worry. Good night." She says, "I've met her, so have my suppositories." Okay, so a little bit of an inappropriate joke on behalf of Blake Lively, referencing inserting something up her rectum. Another time, Lively was so close and comfortable with Baldoni that she freely breastfed in front of him during meetings. She took photos of him holding and soothing her crying baby in her penthouse. They laughed deliriously during late-night writing sessions. All of these took place after the alleged sexual harassment. Another time, this is referenced again. He says, The lawsuit says Baldoni filmed her uncontrollably laughing with him as they rehearsed late night into the evening, often delirious with exhaustion. So this is the infamous text message that Blake Lively sent to Justin Baldoni, again at 10 p.m. in the evening. Wrote this man an essay. I'm not sure if Ryan Reynolds was sitting right next to her when she did, but I do not think it is remotely out of the realm of possibility that someone as ego-driven as Ryan Reynolds could have become insecure in the fact that his wife was collaborating so closely and filming something so intimate as this film was with someone, and as they say, you lose them the way that you catch them. So that could have been a thought that was percolating in the back of his mind. That was the underlying emotional factors that drove this disagreement that really should have been settled privately into a full-blown war. As you guys know, this is the infamous text message that was sent the evening that Justin Baldoni was allegedly ambushed by Ryan Reynolds and Taylor Swift, who were talking about how Blake Lively's script was so amazing, basically suggesting that you better pick Blake Lively's script. And this is the infamous message where she compared herself to Khaleesi. She said, "I am Khaleesi. I happen to have a few dragons, for better or worse, but usually for better, because my dragons also protect those I fight for. So really, we all benefit from those gorgeous monsters of mine. You will too, I can promise you." This message really disgusts me because I know we know really powerful people do this, but to just hear somebody so brazenly talk about the influence she has because she's friends with one of the most powerful celebrities in the entire world, Ryan Reynolds is obviously extremely powerful in Hollywood, to sort of use that as a veiled threat is pretty disgusting and honestly just really embarrassing. I don't think Taylor Swift is probably happy about being used as a bargaining tool. So the first thing that Blake Lively seemingly did lie about is when she was saying that Justin Baldoni was fat shaming her and that there was no scene in the film where she had to be lifted. There was in fact a scene where she had to be lifted, which was cut from the movie because of her. Justin Baldoni did in fact and does have proof that he has a back injury, and he also did show proof that the reason he inquired about her weight was so he could practice physically, so he could lift her up. So he wasn't really fat shaming her. Not only was he not fat shaming her, he was actually doing the opposite, and we have messages to prove that he was actually supporting her and the insecurities that she was feeling. He said, "I want you to look amazing. Anything you're insecure about, we'll walk through and get creative together and make you comfortable. I don't want you to stress about your body. It's the last thing you need." So there you go. So Blake Lively responds to this message and says, "As woke as we both are and work to be," first of all, who calls themselves woke? The millennial really jumped out there for a second. "This movie requires a certain aesthetic." So if you're confused about what she's saying there, she's basically saying, it's not politically correct to say, but I gotta get skinny for this role, and I'm gonna do everything I can to accomplish that. She then says this is necessary to make the film a commercial success, using the word commercial several times, to me showing that it being a financial success was maybe her top priority. And at the bottom of this message, she says, "We are gonna kill it and be so fit they have to Lola us to look less bangin'." Lola, in other words, means visual effects. So she's basically saying, don't worry, Justin, me and you got this. We're going to become so fit that they're going to have to visually edit us to make us look uglier. The other misleading part about Blake Lively's lawsuit is that she said there was no intimacy coordinator. There was 100% an intimacy coordinator on set for all scenes where it was required. Another specific part about Blake Lively's lawsuit that seems to have been very grossly misrepresented by her was she alleged that Justin Baldoni basically broke character, smelt her, was being very creepy, said that she smelt good, not as part of the film, but as himself, and it made her very uncomfortable. But apparently, Blake Lively had apologized because her spray tan smelled bad, and Justin Baldoni said, "Don't worry, it smells good," and they continued acting. This was allegedly caught on film. So this is one of these examples where if it goes to court and they have the full footage of her saying this, and she was trying to make him look like a creep, and it was just this very innocuous interaction that's not going to make her look good. Another similar thing happened later was when she alleged that he was commenting on her physical appearance. They apparently have video and audio footage of Lively making fun of his nose and saying that he needed a nose job. And we're not even halfway done, so go to part 2. Okay, welcome to part 2 of going through Justin Baldoni's lawsuit to Blake Lively. This is not my job. I don't get paid for this, so please follow me. It's 2 a.m. and we are only halfway done. So, another part about Blake Lively's lawsuit, when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, Justin Baldoni is such a creep, is he allegedly called her hot during the scene where she was wearing a onesie. According to this lawsuit, what Baldoni actually said was he said, it will be hot, as it was 90 degrees in the small bar with no air conditioning. Lively mischaracterizes this in her complaint as Baldoni referring to her personally as hot, using the slang term. And in the footnotes of this section, it says this entire interaction was documented on camera and they have the receipts. This is yet another example that if this is true, presumably it is, and it goes to court, and they have footage of him saying it will be hot and not calling her hot, and she tried to basically completely ruin this person's life over something that was a very malicious fabrication of the context of what was really said, that's not going to look good for her. And this is kind of why my predominant theory is that Ryan Reynolds is behind this, because it really feels like at a certain point, Blake Lively just stopped wanting to be in contact with Justin Baldoni, and someone behind the scenes took over and was contacting everybody, Sony, Wayfair, Baldoni. It was all going through Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' people. I think that this was Ryan Reynolds, because this is the only explanation for me, because if Blake Lively knew the truth, I can't imagine she would be willing to risk her entire reputation trying to take someone else down when it doesn't seem like the facts are on her side. Okay, so this next part is a little bit uncomfortable for me to read because it's not appropriate, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's important. Blake Lively alleged in her complaint that Justin Baldoni was basically this creep who kept bringing up all of these sexual things, and specifically referenced a conversation where they were talking about orgasming for a sexual scene in the film. So the lawsuit states that the character Ryle was not to orgasm after he satisfied Lily, the character. Lively remarked as herself and said, I'd be mortified if that happened to me, personalizing the character's sexual act. Baldoni, following Lively's lead in what he understood to be an attempt to connect with the characters, remarked that those have been some of the most beautiful moments between him and his wife. They then moved on. So Justin Baldoni was basically saying, I satisfy my wife. It seems like Ryan Reynolds doesn't satisfy his. That's just what it says. I'm sorry. She also accused Justin Baldoni about constantly bringing up porn, but apparently another instance that was caught on camera was Lively started that conversation, and she said, I don't want it to look like porn, and opened up that she had never seen porn in her life. Baldoni complimented her and said that's wonderful because unfortunately he was exposed to it as a young age and developed an addiction, which is something he's discussed in his book and his podcasts. So it was actually Blake Lively allegedly that brought up that conversation to begin with. So Justin Baldoni's lawyer also disputes the claim that Blake Lively made in her complaint, where she said she felt uncomfortable that Justin Baldoni hired his friend to play the OBGYN. They state that Baldoni casting an experienced actor who happens to be a friend is no different than casting Lively's sister, who was cast because she is Lively's sister. So I didn't realize this, but they actually did hire Blake Lively's sister for this film, so she did have a role. And then they explain that the actor portraying the OBGYN is actually an award-winning Shakespearean-trained actor with a master's degree in acting from UCLA. Now, this next part, I want you guys to pay attention because it is probably the most damning piece of information for Blake Lively, and it is ultimately the reason why I was so on her side to begin with, because it's really starting to seem like she grossly misled the public with this one little thing, but it's very, very important, possibly the most important thing. It is crucial to note that the list of grievances read at the ambush meeting where Ryan Reynolds verbally assaulted Justin Baldoni allegedly was separate and apart from the 17-point return to production demands and were never presented to any of the parties present. Though Lively's complaint misleadingly suggests the parties agreed to a list of 30 items, many of the items listed on her complaint were new, entirely based in lies, and neither read nor provided to any of the parties, let alone agreed to. The only document presented to the parties was the 17-point return to production demands presented on November 9th and signed over 2 weeks after this meeting on January 9th. So the reason why that's so huge is the way that Blake Lively's lawyers wrote her complaint is she put down this list of 30 grievances at the beginning. And she made it seem like Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath signed on to those grievances of all of those little specific things of walking in the trailer and sexual harassment and watching her when she was breastfeeding and smelling her hair and bringing up porn and all of those really, really messy stuff. That actually isn't what was agreed to in the meeting. So there was a 17-point list that was some of the more generic things that they agreed to because it was already in the contracts. And then there was a 30-point list that she wrote after the fact that nobody ever saw, but then she included in the lawsuit to make it seem like they agreed to that, which is actually like definitely grounds for defamation because it really is that misleading. I hope that I did a good enough job explaining why that's so significant. Then the next 30 pages, you guys know, just sort of details all the screenshots of the editors, the producers, the castmates. What it really does is it paints a picture of Blake Lively, sort of everybody treating her the way that they treated Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada. As soon as she walks in, everybody's bending over backwards for her. They're giving her the dailies. They're letting her have the producer credits. They're letting her edit the movie. They're just completely bending over backwards for her because she was constantly threatening to destroy everybody's reputation and not market the film. So it definitely does a good job of lending credence to the claim that she tried to take over the film. Another piece of evidence that is very damning to Blake Lively and wasn't in the original lawsuit that Justin Baldoni filed, which is why I said I wanted to see proof of this, is they do in fact have proof that they screen tested both Justin Baldoni's version of the film as well as Blake Lively's version of the film with an audience, and they scored his significantly higher, 20% higher, rated his film as excellent versus Blake Lively's version. And significantly, the only group that it polled well with was actually men, which is not the target audience for this film. Need I remind you, since it's become completely lost, that this film was about domestic violence and was a film for women. So Justin Baldoni kind of rightfully used this as evidence that they should have used his version of the film, but Blake Lively reneged on her promise and insisted that her version be released to the public instead of Baldoni's cut, even claiming that the book's author, Colleen Hoover, would refuse to promote the film as well if Blake Lively's version was not chosen. Okay, you guys know these pages. Basically, he was shunned from the film. He had a spinal cord injury. He was in the hospital. He was sent to the basement for his own premiere, which is pretty terrible. And then another significant aspect is Blake Lively was adamant about getting the PGA designation mark. So this is a coveted producer credit that is taken very seriously in Hollywood. So the only reason that I think that Blake Lively wanted this so bad is I believe that she possibly thought that she was going to receive an Oscar for this film, if not for Best Actress, which is hilarious. She would never obviously get that. But if the film was nominated for Best Picture, the producers are the ones that receive the Oscar. So if she has the PGA credit, that's a huge thing for her resume to have an Oscar. So I think that's the reason why she had that. And then ultimately when they said no, that's when she messaged them and said, any goodwill between us is done. So that was her red line. After, they still capitulated to her and eventually gave her the PGA credit, but apparently it wasn't enough for Blake. After seemingly getting literally everything that she wanted, according to these receipts, and she still decided to make this public. Another piece of this lawsuit that I think most people missed is a very subtle Taylor Swift call out here. So listen to this. The other cast members also unfollowed Baldoni, creating the false impression that Baldoni had done something wrong. Lively was leaving what she had earlier referred to as crumbs, a social media strategy she had learned from a close celebrity friend to give fans just enough to allow them to come to their own conclusions, thereby launching an army of detectives that, on information and belief, Lively hoped would turn against Baldoni. So they're alleging that Lively orchestrated this and sort of left the breadcrumbs. I think that's an obvious reference to Taylor Swift, who is known to sort of leave little hints and unfollow people and do this and that because she knows she's under such a microscope. She can do the tiniest little thing to completely shift the narrative in such a dramatic way. Now, you might be wondering, but why did Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds care so much about taking over this film? And I think the obvious explanation is that they wanted the rights to the sequel. It was a commercial success. I believe that Blake Lively saw how successful Deadpool was and wanted to emulate that and thought that this was her moment. And she used her husband's power of owning his own production company to extort the rest of the cast members into complying because they wanted to be part of the sequel. Well, my friends, if you can believe it, it has only been 24 hours, and the tea today is actually even hotter than it was yesterday. So, as I'm sure many of you are already aware, as you've been spamming me in my DMs, yes, it is true, Justin Baldoni's lawyer has released the full footage of the alleged incident where Justin Baldoni supposedly sexually harassed Blake Lively. Now, I don't feel the need to tell you guys what to think because you're the jury. This is a courtroom. Let's just go through the evidence together, and you're all welcome to come to your own conclusions because the facts don't lie. So, in Blake Lively's lawsuit, this is how she described the situation. And then I'm going to show you the footage of what actually happened and allow you guys to discern whether or not her portrayal of that was accurate or not. On another occasion, Mr. Baldoni and Miss Lively were filming a slow dance scene for a montage in which no sound was recorded. Narrator chimes in, sound was recorded. Mr. Baldoni chose to let the camera roll and have them perform the scene, but did not act in character as Ryle. Instead, he spoke to Miss Lively out of character as himself. At one point, he leaned forward and slowly dragged his lips from her ear down her neck as he said, "It smells so good." None of this was remotely in character or based on any dialogue in the script, and nothing needed to be said because, again, there was no sound. Mr. Baldoni was caressing Miss Lively with his mouth in a way that had nothing to do with their roles, and when Miss Lively later objected to this behavior, Miss Baldoni's response was, "I'm not even attracted to you." Wait a second. Blake Lively made a mistake in her lawsuit. It says Miss Baldoni's response. So unless she's referring to Justin Baldoni's wife, I think they meant to write Mr. Baldoni. Are you guys not even gonna spell check your lawsuit? Wow, that's really embarrassing. Wow, that's actually crazy that I just noticed that. So anyway, let's watch what really happened. I'm old-fashioned. I don't do editing, so here's my laptop.
Let's score another.
If you should
I'm not getting dirt on you today.
I'm probably getting breakfast.
Well, it's not that. It's my body makeup.
That's it. So I think that we can all agree that Blake Lively's characterization of this interaction was not accurate, and I'm still not over the fact that her team made a typo in such an important and consequential lawsuit. Seriously, what little respect I had for you guys is completely gone. However, since I'm me and I'm an asshole and I have no loyalty to these people whatsoever, my only loyalty is to the truth, I would also like to point out there is something that is not fully accurate in Justin's recount of this interaction as well. In Justin's lawsuit, and this is minor, but I noticed it because nothing gets past me, they say, Lively apologized for the smell of her spray tan and body makeup. Baldoni responded, "It smells good." Blake Lively never apologized for the smell of her spray tan. She just said,
It's not.
"I'm getting my spray tan on you." She didn't say anything about the smell. So regardless, this interaction is uncomfortable and awkward to watch because acting is a very uncomfortable job to have. But I definitely don't think any of this constitutes harassment. Now, Blake Lively's legal team has actually already responded to the public disclosure of this footage being released. And they stated, Justin Baldoni and his lawyer may hope that this latest stunt will get ahead of the very damning evidence against him. But the video itself is damning. Every frame of the released footage corroborates to the letter what Miss Lively described in her complaint. Every moment of this was improvised by Mr. Baldoni with no discussion or consent. They then go on to say that while they are focused on misleading media narratives, we are focused on the legal process. We are continuing our efforts to require Mr. Baldoni and his associates to answer in court under oath rather than through manufactured media stunts. Blake, if by some miracle you're watching this, just understand, the lawyers don't care about you. Lawyers don't care. They just want to get paid. They're getting paid a shit ton of money whether or not you win or you lose. You need to talk to somebody that actually cares about you. And if someone in your life actually cared about you, they probably would have told you to just drop this because your attempt to rehabilitate your reputation is massively backfiring. People had already moved on, honestly. Like, no one was talking about you anymore. And this is just not looking good. If this does go to court and it becomes another Amber Heard situation, another Gwyneth Paltrow situation, okay, the Gwyneth Paltrow one was funny, but I just don't think it's going to go your way. And the reason that I think this is Justin Baldoni's lawyer has actually just responded to that response already. This is all in the same day. And Justin Baldoni's lawyer has stated that he is putting together a website as we speak where they're planning to upload every single text message that they have between these two, every single piece of evidence, and every single piece of video footage from that set. So if the facts are not 100% on your side, Blake, which they seem to not be, the last thing you want is to go through an entire discovery process and have every single email, every single text, every single piece of video footage microanalyzed by TikTokers. Don't do it. Run. Settle, drop it, and move on with your family and your life. Hello? Control room? Got it. So we are just getting word that Colleen Hoover has officially jumped ship. If you guys remember, Colleen Hoover, the original author of this book, actually came to Blake Lively's defense publicly, and after the backlash, she has completely deleted her Instagram account. So I would not count on Colleen Hoover supporting you anymore. And as public perception steadily shifts against Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, I am starting to expect all the people who were defending them publicly to start dropping like flies. So again, I just don't think it's in Blake Lively's best interest to go to court and have this entire thing be televised. But if my understanding of human psychology is correct, I think that they've dug themselves too deep that I don't see them settling. I think that they'll probably end up going to court and just ruining what little goodwill they have left. There's also a section of the video where Blake Lively tells Justin Baldoni that he should get a rhinoplasty and then says, just kidding.
So nosy.
I know.
And noses.
And my nose is so big.
Yes. I was hoping that we could address this. It's not too late. Just gotta shut down. We gotta call an insurance month and just deal with that.
Yeah.
And then,
God.
just kidding.
No, it's true. That's why we hired Jenny Slate too. Our nose is big.
He says that's why we hired Jenny Slate too. Our noses match is what he says. I don't think that he was being insulting, to be honest, when he said our noses match. That's just a fact. It is a fact. He has a larger nose, and Jenny Slate has that more pointy, a little bit of a larger nose. I don't think that's bad. I don't think having a large nose is a bad or a good thing. It's just an observation. And I actually think it's fair. It does kind of make them look more like siblings because it's a pretty physically defining characteristic. So here's what I think is happening. I think that Justin Baldoni's lawyer is being so brazen because he has seen the evidence and he understands that there is a mountain of it that substantiates Justin Baldoni's side much more significantly than it does Blake Lively's. I think that he wants it to go to court, and I think that he's sort of calling their bluff, saying, go ahead and do it because it's not going to work out for you. So this is actually sort of substantiating my predominant theory, which is the real person behind this is actually Ryan Reynolds. I think he's the one that's pushing this because he's defending his wife, defending his honor, trying to get back at someone who he's probably a little bit jealous of. I think that they thought this guy's a nobody and we push around everybody we interact with and we're going to do the same. And they were taken aback when he didn't just completely roll over, although in some ways he sort of did, honestly. They got everything that they wanted, but it backfired. And the truth is, the main reason it backfired was because of the very poor decision making that went into using a film about intimate partner violence to advertise an alcohol company and a very poorly thought out cash grab that was her hair care company that has now gone bankrupt. And I honestly think in the process of Ryan Reynolds trying to destroy Justin Baldoni, he's actually going to end up destroying his own wife and the mother of his children. And I think it's honestly a really good lesson of what ego does to people. And when you rise to this level and you're not just an actor anymore, you're approaching billionaire status and you are friends with some of the most powerful people in the world, it gets to your head. And if there's one thing that's true, it's that God will humble anybody. No matter who you are in life, if your head gets too big, God will humble you. And that's what seems to be happening. And honestly, they deserve it. Okay, so I have never been more scared in my entire life that my account could actually get deleted. So if you're watching this right now and my account mysteriously disappears, I need you guys to know it was Ryan Reynolds. I know their team is watching this video right now, and if you guys do something as idiotic and drastic as taking down my account, Number one, everybody will know it was you. Number two, I will go scorched earth right to YouTube. And number three, that would be a very bad decision because if information does come out that is favorable to Blake Lively, I will be the first one to cover it honestly and fairly. So with that disclaimer, I have a massive update to share with you guys. So it seems that the conclusion I came to after deciphering the entirety of all of the lawsuits is in fact true. The real villain of the story is Ryan Reynolds. So according to new reporting from Candace Owens, who spoke to someone who reportedly worked on the set of It Ends With Us, there was an incident that occurred. So this person alleged that everything started when Ryan Reynolds decided to stroll onto the movie set one day and review the dailies. For those of you who don't know, the dailies refers to the culmination of all of the footage from that day. So if you remember, something I pointed out in the lawsuits is that Blake Lively was messaging Justin Baldoni that she wanted to see the dailies, and she was very persistent about this. Everybody was very confused. This is very atypical for an actor and actress to request something like this. The dailies is not the edited footage. You see everything. You see before cut, after cut. You see the way the actors are interacting. So then what happened is he decided to take a look at the script, and between the two, something allegedly set him off. The person claims, and Candace Owens specifies that she can't verify this part because this part could be hearsay, but it was apparently the talk on the set, that production assistants overheard Ryan and Blake having an argument in her trailer. So my theory is that it wasn't Blake Lively at all who wanted the dailies, it was Ryan Reynolds. And how do I know this? It's consistent with his behavior. If you remember, Blake Lively specifically told Justin Baldoni that she rewrote the rooftop scene, and then later accidentally admitted at the red carpet it was actually Ryan Reynolds who rewrote it. So I don't think it's a crazy thing to assume that he's been the person behind this all along. I think it's very likely he possibly saw some of these text messages that were highly flirtatious, was seeing his wife, who just had a baby, was making out and pretending to fall in love with this individual, creatively collaborating with them, became very insecure because, as we all know, he's someone who fell in love repeatedly on set with people like Scarlett Johansson and became a control freak and felt that he had to take over in some way. So after this alleged blow up, this anonymous source stated that Ryan Reynolds started being on the set on a regular basis as if he were her chaperone. And that is when he started inserting himself into the actual production, including writing lines. Justin Baldoni's lawsuit also did state that Ryan Reynolds went to extreme lengths to humiliate him, including modeling a character called Nice Pool after clearly Justin Baldoni in the Deadpool movie, where that character was actually Poo 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 by Blake Lively, who was also in the Deadpool movie. This is not just your average workplace disagreement. This was an impassioned, loathing, burning, vengeful hatred that Ryan Reynolds felt toward Justin Baldoni. Something else that Candace Owens included in her Instagram stories, which I think is a great point, is actually Scarlett Johansson's explanation as to why she ended up getting divorced from Ryan Reynolds, which gives us a window into his personality structure. She said, "The logistics of being with another actor are challenging. There has to be real understanding of how you share your time, especially when two people's careers are going at the same rate, or even if one person is more successful than the other. That also proves challenging because there may be a competitive thing. Perhaps Ryan Reynolds, not perhaps, he seems to be very jealous and also likes to be the one in the spotlight because he's an actor." Further proof of how jealous Ryan Reynolds really is that infamous clip where he was doing press for his wife's movie, which is already so bizarre, when he did that video clip with the man who played Atlas, and he made some type of joke about how he didn't like seeing his wife with another man. Behind every single joke is an element of truth. So these very brazen, bizarre acts of really public humiliation toward Justin Baldoni, to me, signify that Ryan Reynolds was seeking vengeance and was hoping to establish dominance over him. It seems to me, personality-wise, that Blake Lively clearly has issues with intimacy. She's constantly deflecting compliments and always deflecting with humor and jokes, and she said this in the text messages as well. So it wouldn't take much for Ryan Reynolds to see Blake Lively opening up, perhaps being vulnerable, and sensing that that's not something that we typically experience in our relationship, and feeling that she was emotionally connecting to Justin on a deeper level. Creating a film like this is a deeply emotional experience. I just saw Candace Owens also added, he tried to peacock Justin Baldoni, who is objectively more attractive than Ryan, by injecting himself into every layer of the movie, from the script to the promos, and reminding Justin who the A-lister is. I agree with this. I think it's very likely because this is exactly how people in Hollywood are. They're all about labels. They're all about who has more money. Justin Baldoni's net worth is something like $3 or $4 million. Ryan Reynolds' net worth is something like $600-700 million, approaching billionaire status, which just goes to show you the level of ego that you have to have, because if Ryan Reynolds ends up losing this lawsuit, he could possibly lose his entire net worth. I don't think that's likely, but it just goes to show you how blinding rage and ego truly can be. So ultimately, what I think happened is extremely simple and extremely human. I think that Ryan Reynolds is an incredibly jealous, controlling husband. I think he became increasingly insecure with the messages, the late night flirtations, the working on the script. I think Blake Lively was likely very excited, even though she was clearly also trying to take over the film and was not acting as a way an actor should act. You're supposed to listen to the director, but that's fine. She wanted to be creatively involved. Maybe it meant something to her. She was spending a lot of time. She went from being a stay-at-home mom for so many years to having the biggest moment of her entire career, the biggest film of her entire career. He became a little bit jealous. And in order to deflect the accusations that there was an emotional connection percolating beneath the surface, she said something like, oh, he's creepy anyway, this is purely professional. And then she kind of had to continuously follow through with that, led to him being more overbearing. Reticular activating system starts seeing what you want to see. Oh, they lingered a little bit. They were laughing in this corner. They were talking deliriously in the evening and laughing with each other. He was holding their babies, visiting their penthouse, and it all completely exploded. I honestly don't think that Blake Lively really wanted to go with the lawsuit. I think that Ryan Reynolds was pushing it for two reasons. The first being it allows him to destroy Justin Baldoni, which is ultimately what he wants. He wants revenge. He wants to destroy the man who he felt was going to steal his wife. And number two, he did it because Blake Lively is crying in her bedroom and he wants to be the savior. And in his twisted mind, he thought that this was going to just simply be a little New York Times article. They're millennials as well, so they don't understand the power of social media. And they simply thought, oh, these are the gatekeepers. This is mainstream media. They're going to go with our narrative and nobody else is going to ask any questions. He did not anticipate that it would backfire to this extent. And ironically, I think in a lot of ways, Ryan Reynolds' very toxic, possessive behavior is actually perfectly mirroring the content of the book and the movie It Ends With Us, particularly in the way that men behave within toxic relationships. So for example, if there's a man and a woman in a bar and someone comes up to the woman and says something offensive, oftentimes, instead of de-escalating the situation and removing themselves, which is what the man should do if they were truly looking out for the safety of the woman, they completely escalate the situation and it turns into a full-on brawl fight, potentially endangering everybody involved. Oftentimes, the man will say that the reason he drastically escalated that situation to the point of extreme violence is because he was protecting the woman. But in reality, he was really defending his own personal ego that was bruised by the fact that another man spoke to his woman in that way. And there's that toxic subconscious idea that the woman is his property and he has to defend that through an act of physical violence. And I think this is exactly what Ryan Reynolds is doing. On the surface, and what he's likely thinking is he's saying, I'm defending my woman. But in reality, what he's doing is he is protecting his own ego that was bruised by the fact that his wife developed an emotional connection with this other good-looking man. So in the same way that this woman in the bar could be accidentally physically injured by her boyfriend's decision to escalate a situation, Ryan Reynolds is doing the exact same thing. He's the main driver who's deciding to escalate the situation publicly, escalate the situation legally in his attempt to destroy Justin Baldoni, which is actually inadvertently destroying his own wife. So it looks like this film that was supposed to depict a fictional toxic relationship actually had a very real one behind the scenes.
Christ, it's been 6 minutes and 30 seconds, so fuck me. I'm sorry. You probably have kids all over you and a baby on your boob and you're listening to me ramble at 2 a.m. I hope you're feeling better and give Ryan my love. Thank you for sending me that. It means the world to me that you trust me with your feelings and your thoughts.
Okay, you need to stop what you're doing immediately because I think I just discovered something in the Blake Lively Justin Baldoni fiasco that could be breaking news. So, if you guys have been paying attention, you would know that people have been freaking out because they investigated the metadata of the New York Times article and discovered that things were embedded at around December 10th. And in other words, this means that the New York Times was working on the article weeks before the lawsuit was ever filed, which suggests that Lively colluded with them to put together the article. When I heard this, I was like, duh, that's not surprising, because the article was published the same day that the complaint was filed. So obviously they didn't just whip it up in a couple hours. They obviously were working on it for an extended period of time. I'm like, it doesn't make the New York Times look great, but I didn't think it was like breaking news. So I looked into the source code, I think that's what it's called myself, and I found out that when you look at the metadata for the embedded articles, specifically this image, the one of the text messages, you can see that it was actually embedded on October 31st. And if you look to the side, it says message embed generator. And I think what that means is it's some kind of an app that they use to make these texts look prettier. So you can see these texts are real in the sense of the words that they actually said, but they're not direct screenshots. So they were sort of Photoshop them to make them look more legitimate, if that makes sense. So if this is true, and you guys can please correct me because I am not a tech savvy person at all, so maybe I'm getting this wrong, but the date clearly says October 31st. So doesn't that mean that they were working on the article as early as October 31st? And if that's the case, the reason why that's so scary is because it means that the New York Times was actually colluding for months, which sort of furthers the narrative that this article may have been the real smear campaign. I don't know, I could be wrong, so don't crucify me if I'm wrong, but this is just what I discovered. Okay, so I promised myself that I wouldn't continue to discuss this case unless there was some kind of new bombshell information. And ladies and gentlemen, there is officially new bombshell information. So as promised, Justin Baldoni's lawyer has released a website with all of the receipts and many things I've never seen before. So I printed off everything, I went through it, I'm gonna take you guys through it with me. And not only did I print off every single receipt and read it myself, but I also dedicated hours of my life to reading and finishing this book. And if you know anything about me, you know how much I hate fiction novels, especially books like this. But it was important for me to fully immerse myself in the story and specifically immerse myself in the mind of Colleen Hoover, which is kind of a scary place if you ask me. But it helped a lot to contextualize the entire situation, and all of the pieces are finally starting to come together. So wherever you are, grab a bag of popcorn, get your favorite snack, because we have a lot of material to go through. I would just like to say I do not get paid for my content. I've never made $1 from TikTok, and I have now spent about 80 hours of my precious short time here on earth reading this garbage for you guys. So at the very least, you gotta follow me. And I also think I deserve a Pulitzer Prize, but that's a whole other story. So here's the tea. Justin Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, has amended and refiled his lawsuit to include some receipts that we didn't have before. He particularly noted something that I discovered in my video, which was the October 31st date in the embedded image of the New York Times article. There seems to be some debate over who found it first. I obviously think that I did, but it really does not matter. This has been one collective group project, group effort, and the thing that matters is that Brian Friedman is actually watching our videos and changing his lawsuits in real time. He actually publicly admitted that he's starting to include evidence found by us. The New York Times actually responded to Brian Friedman and called us amateur sleuths who are incorrect. So I guess we'll see who's right and who's wrong. But I just personally love to see legacy media like the New York Times freak out, because people would rather watch random people like me with no law degree talk about topics in my bedroom because they trust I'm being honest, as opposed to these huge mainstream media organizations which are progressively losing power and credibility in the eyes of regular people. And I just personally love to see that. And now that I know that Brian Friedman is watching my videos, I have a message for him. Brian, if the reason that you win this historic $400 million lawsuit with the New York Times is because of the October 31st date that you admitted was discovered by us, number one, you better share that money with us. And number two, I would like a spot in that courtroom. I don't know what needs to happen, but you gotta get me on the list. You guys have to back me up. I wanna be there reporting live when it happens. I've invested so much time into this. So whatever needs to happen, we gotta make it happen. So one of the most important and new pieces of information that we have are text messages between Justin Baldoni and Ryan Reynolds. And the reason why they matter is because it gives us some insight into, number one, how Justin Baldoni was interfacing with them behind the scenes. And number two, how Ryan Reynolds also acts in real life when he's not, doesn't think a camera's in front of him. So we have the text messages here. They're a little bit blurry, but Justin Baldoni basically says something to the effect of how much he absolutely loves Ryan Reynolds, completely groveling at his feet, kissing the ground that he walks on. It's honestly a little bit embarrassing. How he wanted to message him earlier, but he was too nervous. And he says literally, and I quote, I don't really have a lot of close female friends that aren't also close with my wife, let alone married ones. And so I guess this is just an awkward text to say, I'd like to be friends. And then he says, I'm happy there's no check yes or no box. This guy is like so corny. I originally thought he was super fake because I'm like, no one actually acts like this in real life. I think he's almost so earnest, it's physically painful for other people to deal with because it's so rare in Hollywood. He's literally like a little boy just saying, hey, I want to be friends, and clearly capitulating to Ryan, just saying like, I'm not trying to step on any toes here by talking to your wife every day and not introducing myself to you. It's a little bit bizarre on both their ends. I feel like it's giving like 1950s husband, like, hey, is it okay if I talk to your wife? But regardless, it was a very nice message. So Ryan Reynolds then waits a few days, possibly a week, before responding to this message with an absolute essay of his own. We're talking like 4 pages here. And in it, he speaks in vivid detail about a few things, particularly about how Justin Baldoni is extremely lucky and how he's won the lottery with having someone like Blake Lively be a part of this film. I would like to note Blake Lively was paid $3 million for a film with a $25 million budget, which means her salary accounted for 12% of the entire budget of the film, which is pretty substantial. I don't know if I'd call that winning the lottery. I'd call that fulfilling a job, and she was also only working for 6 months. So I think that's a pretty good deal for both of them, if you ask me. But regardless, he also goes on to detail and accredit Blake Lively as being the creative force behind every successful business decision he's ever made. And then in the very end, we get into what Ryan Reynolds really wanted. So he says, I'd have your line producer's face tattooed to my perineum. I'm not going to elaborate what that body part is, but it's pretty inappropriate. If he, she, or they can figure out how to start 2 weeks earlier. So previously, he sort of discussed how his schedules weren't lining up properly, and this was the first time that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds were going to be away from the kids at the same time. And in terms of scheduling, it would have been very beneficial to him if Blake Lively could end 2 weeks earlier, so she could be home with the kids, and was basically willing to do anything. He ends the message as saying, I happen to adore you, Justin. XOXO. What kind of 50-year-old heterosexual man messages another man XOXO? Gossip Girl, like, what? Is that weird to me, or am I just being, like, I think that's weird, but regardless, it seemed like he was really trying to do anything to alter the schedule. That's not really typical for actors to be able to do that, but Ryan Reynolds is obviously aware that he has a lot of referent power with this person who's expressed and worn his heart on his sleeve as saying he worships him, and maybe took a little bit of advantage of that. So if we fast forward to August of 2024, there was definitely no XOXO happening because we got a glimpse of the statement that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds demanded Justin Baldoni release. Otherwise, in their words, the gloves were going to come off. So they demanded that he put this statement out that said, Blake Lively, Colleen Hoover, and the entire cast led with professionalism, and any negativity directed toward them is ours to own. He then goes on to say, we hold ourselves accountable. It's not anyone's job but ours, and that is part of being man enough. Now, it's a little bit disturbing knowing that Ryan Reynolds wrote this because he's using the book title that Justin Baldoni wrote called Man Enough against him. And specifically, the holding myself accountable part and owning your mistakes is something that Justin Baldoni specifically said in that voice note that we all heard. So could it be possible that retroactively or in the future, Ryan Reynolds heard that voice note and then wanted to weaponize it against him and use it as a final way to say F you? Because I don't think it's a coincidence that he sort of took a direct quote from the voice note and then also trying to weaponize his own book against him. Releasing the statement would have been a career ender because more than likely Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively wouldn't have stopped. They would have continued, and then people would have said, what does this message mean? Because if you guys remember, rewind to August, Blake Lively was being criticized for things that she did. She was being criticized for advertising an alcohol company and a hair care brand that had absolutely nothing to do with the source material of the book. So what exactly are they taking ownership for? It being a troubled set? People weren't really talking about that. So they would have kept digging and then likely would have continued with the sexual harassment allegations, and then this would have been an admission of guilt. In looking at the evidence, I also found something very bizarre I wanted to run past you guys. So on April 25th, this was the day that Justin Baldoni visited the penthouse and was verbally berated by Ryan Reynolds for fat-shaming Blake Lively. We now know fat-shaming really just meant that he inquired about her weight so he could lift her for a scene that was definitely in the film because we have proof of that. But he profusely apologized. Blake Lively basically said, "It's my way or the highway." And only 2 days later, on April 27th, Blake Lively personally invited Justin Baldoni on her private jet with her and her children to fly to Los Angeles so they could, number one, work on the script together, hours there and hours back, and also so Justin Baldoni could see his wife and kids who were in Los Angeles and who he missed. Could it be that Blake Lively felt guilty that Ryan overstepped and verbally berated Justin, so she extended an olive branch to him in the form of inviting him on the plane? And how did Ryan feel that 2 days after he basically accused this guy of being a creep, inquiring about his wife's weight, that he then went on a plane alone with his wife and his children? Okay, I'm running out of time, but we have so much more to go through. I'm working on putting everything together, so stay tuned for updates. I'm chronicling the entire timeline, color-coding it on this board, and I'm slowly starting to put all the pieces together. We're still missing something. There's some kind of inciting incident we're not aware of yet, but we're definitely getting much, much closer. So stay tuned for updates, and especially because tomorrow is the first hearing that they're having in New York to see if the gag order will be approved or denied, and if the judge will drop the lawsuit. So a lot's going to be going on tomorrow, and I will continue to keep you guys updated. Hey, so if you guys are watching this right now, I'd like to let you know that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds have successfully gotten a video I posted last night taken down. More specifically, they got it banned in the United States because that's where they have their connections with TikTok US. You might be wondering, how do I know it was them? Because 2 weeks ago, someone from TikTok had notified me that their team had reported my account for misinformation and attempted to get my account deleted. But because I've never actually broken any TikTok rules and have been very fair in my reporting, they were unable to do so. So you might be wondering, what exactly was it about the video posted last night specifically that was so explosive they needed to get it scrubbed from the internet in just a few hours? And the answer to that is it's the first time I ever spoke to an exclusive inside source who told me something about the legal battle that clearly Blake and Ryan so desperately do not want the public to know, otherwise why are they attempting to censor me? Additionally, I'm progressively beginning to believe what I reported on is true, otherwise they would not be trying so hard to silence me. I think it is so pathetic that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds put together this BS lawsuit about how people are trying to manipulate public perception because their egos cannot even conceive of a world where anybody could dislike them, when in reality, they're the ones manipulating public perception by censoring people like me. So I'm officially seeking legal representation to sue Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds myself for infringing on my freedom of speech, and if TikTok does not reinstate this video in the next 12 hours, I will be adding them to the lawsuit as well. So in the meantime, you guys can watch this banned video on my YouTube channel. I'll put the link in my bio, and I need someone to connect me with Brian Friedman's team immediately because I have some very important information to share with him I'm sure he would love to have. Okay, so I literally don't care what you're doing right now. If you're driving, pull over. If you're at a funeral, go home, because I have some earth-shattering updates to share with you in the ongoing Lively Baldoni saga. So, what's going on right now? Right now, Lively and Baldoni's legal teams are sort of competing for the attention and trying to get on the judge's good side by going through all these administrative stuff that you have to go through when you're filing lawsuits. But before I get into the details of exactly what their respective legal teams are saying, I do have to start on a positive note and congratulate Blake Lively, who has just come out as a lesbian. Because as I was reading Michael Gottlieb's letter, who is Blake Lively's lawyer, of course, to Judge Lehman, I noticed that he wrote that Miss Lively and Miss Reynolds need until March 20th to respond to the Wayfair party's amended lawsuit. I was not aware that Ryan Reynolds is now a woman, and I definitely didn't know that Blake Lively was married to one. So, go Pride! Woo! The reason I'm being annoying and bringing this up is because this is the case of a lifetime. Michael, I'm speaking to you if you're watching this video now. And if I'm the judge and I'm reading this, where you're basically asking for a favor and asking for an extension on your homework, and you can't even read it over one time to make sure you're not making really stupid typos when you know the entire world is going to be going through this with a microscope, it's sad. And for me, when I was a teaching assistant in university, that would just always turn me off. If there's a typo in your document, I'm automatically judging the entire thing because you didn't really put a lot of effort into it. So I just had to call that out, because if this type of work is reflective of Blake Lively's entire legal team. If I were her and Ryan Reynolds, I would be very, very concerned for the quality of work that's going to be put continuing into this ongoing legal battle. So instead of being boring like everybody else and just reading you verbatim what Baldoni's lawyer said and what Lively's lawyer said, I took the liberty of translating it for you into Legally Blonde language because number one, it makes it more funny. And number two, I think it's very entertaining when you strip away the highly intellectual legal jargon, you start to notice that a lot of these lawsuits are really just back in high school, two parents complaining to the principal and then the principal trying to mediate their arguments. And I think you'll see that with these translations. So, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' team wrote to the judge and said, "Hey, Your Honor, so here's the thing. Blake's supposed to file her updated lawsuit by February 14th, but ew, that's way too soon. And we'd much rather have until March 5th. Also, me and Ryan just want to double check that our deadline to file this lawsuit is dumb, please delete it motion is still March 20th. And if it's not, can we just make it March 20th? Thanks, bestie." Now, let's talk about the real issue here. The Wayfair people who were literally suing got multiple extensions for themselves, but when we asked for the exact same thing, they just ignored us. Excuse me, suddenly no one can text back? So rude. And as if things weren't already dramatic enough, some guy we were about to sue, Jed Wallace, completely panicked and sued us first in Texas, which is honestly kind of embarrassing for him. And now we have to waste our time dealing with him too. So, Your Honor, can we just line up these deadlines and get this whole thing organized before it turns into an even bigger disaster? We really appreciate it. XOXO, Blake and Ryan. So the Baldoni camp then responded to this and said, "Dear Your Honor, oh wow, so now Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds think deadline extensions are a totally reasonable request. That's interesting, because when we asked for one while literal wildfires were burning down our homes in Los Angeles, they basically said, tough luck, figure it out. I would like to note that Justin Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, his actual home was literally burnt to the ground in the midst of being sued by Blake Lively. But sure, fine, we're the bigger people here, so we won't block their little request to move their deadline to March 5th. That being said, if they get more time, we should get more time too. So we'd like our deadline pushed to April 16th. Fair is fair." But let's talk about the completely unnecessary side quest they went on in their letter where they threw Jed Wallace under the bus. According to them, he preemptively sued Blake in Texas out of nowhere, like some kind of a legal boogeyman. Except, minor detail, Blake actually sued him first in Texas, which she literally admitted was the right place to do it. So now her team is acting like this lawsuit is some type of totally unhinged attack, when really it's just a response to her own legal moves. That's a pretty big piece of context to leave out, don't you think? So yeah, Your Honor, go ahead and grant their little extension, but let's not pretend this is some grand injustice against them when the receipts say otherwise. Sincerely, the Wayfarer legal team. The judge then responded and said, "Blake and Ryan, I've read your whiny over-the-top request, and let me make this very clear. You are not getting until March 5th. You have given me zero good reasons for needing that much time, and quite frankly, I'm not here to accommodate your procrastination. However, because I'm feeling generous, and only because February 17th is a holiday, you get one extra day, February 18th. That's it, take it or leave it. As for your throw this whole lawsuit in the trash motion, fine, March 20th still stands. But let's be real, if you had spent less time whining about Wayfarer's extensions and more time actually working on your case, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Now please stop wasting the court's time with this nonsense." So in other words, on February 18th, I will be reading Blake Lively's new lawsuit, and I very much hope for her sake that she'll be introducing some new, explosive, earthquake-inducing evidence that's going to prove us all wrong. Otherwise, she may end up working at Build-A-Bear. Now, because I am a martyr for you guys, and that's no shade to Build-A-Bear, actually she'll get fired because she'll try to take it over and she'll be like, no, that's not how you do it. And the mom will be like, get away. No, and she's like, no, I want to feel fulfilled. Give me the bear. And she's going to get fired in 2 seconds. But anyway, because I am a literal martyr for you guys, I purchased this $90 book from Amazon to see if I could find any evidence of Ryan Reynolds being a psychopath, and I think I did find it. Now, on page 148, we have a quote from Ryan Reynolds discussing Nice Pool, who we now know is 100% without a doubt a caricature of Justin Baldoni. He says, quote, "This guy's a fake spiritual piece of shit. It just allows us not to feel too bad about taking his life brutally." I also realized something in looking at the dog pool section, which some people feel that dog pool is actually representing Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' dark and twisted imagination, and I noticed that the dog's name is Peggy. And what I also realized is Blake Lively's dog's name used to be Penny. I know this because in her alleged sexual harassment from a makeup artist, she said that a producer had complained that her dog Penny had taken a crap in the trailer and she needed to resolve that. So is Peggy the dog named after Blake Lively's pet Penny? And could that give further evidence or credence to the theory that this is actually representing and inspired by Blake Lively? And in the section about Ladypool, we have a quote from Ryan Reynolds where he says, "We all sort of feel that it's actually Ladypool who is the one who got Nicepool in the end." Because in the movie, Ladypool is actually the one who... Justin Baldoni. God, may love like this never find me in the world. Actually, maybe it should, because they are so... Like, the actual metaphor of Justin Baldoni being unalived by the group effort of Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively in that film is actually mind-blowing to me. And it is so metaphorical and it is so poetic, and will be even more poetic when Brian Friedman wins this lawsuit for Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are never seen in a movie again. Now, Brandon Sklenner may be sitting at home thinking that he's escaped unscathed, but nobody can hide from me, because I noticed on his Instagram he liked a very interesting comment. Someone commented and said, "You're a slave to Blake and Ryan's money," and he liked the comment. So I'm not sure what that means. Maybe he agrees, maybe it was an accident, but very interesting nonetheless. Now, a huge point of discussion this week is circulating around the resurfaced interview clip of Blake Lively at the Forbes Women's Summit, where she quite literally admits that she intentionally misrepresents her intentions when entering contracts with other people. And the reason why this interview is so significant and will undoubtedly be used as a strong piece of evidence in the courtroom is because she quite literally blatantly, publicly, openly admits to committing the very crime she's being accused of committing, which is promissory fraud. When you enter a contract, a covenant, a relationship with someone, and intentionally conceal your true intentions, say, for example, moving completely outside of the scope of the original contract and not wanting really to be the actor, but to be the director, the producer, the editor, the composer, the costume designer. And it's just absolutely astounding to me that she admitted this publicly, but here you go. You want to find the person responsible for the smear campaign, Blake? Here she is. I've also been working very hard to uncover the identity of the unnamed makeup artist who allegedly committed sexual harassment against Blake Lively, and I have a theory that it could be a man named Leo Wan, who is a guy who worked on the set of Gossip Girl in 2009. So I'd love to hear your theories, or if you guys have any information on this person or any of your own ideas of who it could be. I also got an anonymous tip from someone who allegedly worked on the set of a movie Blake did called The Rhythm Section, where she supposedly did the exact same thing in trying to completely take over the movie. I'm not going to read you guys the entire statement, but I will post it on my story and let you guys judge its validity for yourselves. Also, Colleen Hoover has now reactivated her Instagram account, but we should note she has now deleted most of her photos with Blake Lively, although she is still following both Blake and Ryan Reynolds.